Robert Plank Show, episode 344. Explore your entrepreneurial creativity, mental blocks, and destiny with Leslie Nolan. Hey everyone, thanks for listening. We're talking right now with Leslie Nolan, and Leslie Nolan is an entrepreneur, a visionary artist, a motivational speaker, and founder of Leslie Nolan Design. And she works with creative entrepreneurs who have lost their mojo and inspirational vision and helps them reclaim their power so they can find the courage to create their great work. So, Leslie, glad to have you on.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Robert.
Super duper. So we heard a little bit about you from your bio. Can you kind of tell us in your own words kind of what makes you stand out, what makes you special?
Hmm. Well, I think part of what makes me stand out and makes me special is the years of work that I've done have culminated to this new path where I'm helping other creative entrepreneurs. So I'm a strong strong visionary capacity. I've been an entrepreneur for, I guess this will be my 32nd year. And I love to help creatives and entrepreneurs grow their business and find their true passion in their work. And I love what I do, and I have great patience. So people are drawn to me in my work, and I love to do it.
Super cool. So, to kind of give us a good idea about what you do you have any interesting stories to tell us about maybe like clients or people that came to you and maybe they were blocked creatively and you kind of worked your magic and they came out of the other end, way better for the wear?
Sure, I could give you a couple samples. I could tell you about a few of my clients. So I have one client, Maria. She first came to me in some of my group workshops I did many years ago. And then she chose to work with me one-on-one in a mentorship process. And her first painting that she did was really about unblocking some things that have been holding her back. Some of it is, ancient blocks that she's had, and then really accepting some of her natural genius that she just naturally possesses. And then we continued to work together, and she did this magnificent painting where it really kind of put all of her talents and all of her intentions online. And by the time she finished that mentorship and painting with me, not only did she do a beautiful painting, but she was very clear about the work that she wanted to do in the world. So when she first started the group workshops with me, she had gone through a divorce and was kind of like finding herself. She had a small yoga business that was not working. And then she had been working at Target just to keep her health benefits. And after she finished that second mentorship with me, she went from working 80% at Target, then to 65%, then 40%. By the time she finished her last painting, she was 20% at Target, 80% into a new line of business where she was still doing yoga, which is her major work. But then she started to offer mentorships to her client base. And now I could tell you she's happily 100% doing all of her own work in healing modalities. Her life has completely changed. She's doing retreats. We've done a retreat together, which was a fantastic painting and yoga retreat. And she is full on using all of her skills and capacities. So I'm so very proud of her. Another example would be I've worked with Flo, who's a retired executive, and she's very successful in her sales and in her business for many years. And she first started to take some of the painting workshops with me, and she started painting and painting and painting and painting and painting. And this past fall, I helped her set up her first retrospective art show of all of her works. And she's now selling and showing her work in both New York and New Jersey galleries and is an official visionary artist. So for her, her great work is the painting itself. And for Maria, it's the process to access the information for her great work. So can you see how this has empowering results for both people? Robert, but in different ways.
Yeah, it's starting to make sense, but not fully quite yet. And so, like the painting has come up in both of these scenarios that you laid out there. And so, I mean, what does the painting have to do with this? Like, is this part of your process that you teach?
That is the process. So I work with creative entrepreneurs who've lost their mojo and inspirational vision. I help them to reclaim their power and then find the courage to create their great work. So we've got a few steps there. So yes, it is the process.
Well, great. So, what are those steps that you mentioned?
Please excuse me. So the first one is really about setting your intention. That's a big part of what we do. We set our intention, and sometimes people aren't really quite sure what that is. So we, there's a little coaching thing that I go through with people. So we get a really clear sense of what it is that they want to create in their life and work. And then we set our intention. So when we set an intention, it has to be positive. It's got to be in the present tense. And it's good to create resonance around it so that there's a real bond in order to move forward. So the first step is kind of like getting started is one of our first steps. And then it's trying to figure out what your great work is in the world, even if you don't know. So that's another step we go through. And this all is kind of rolling through as we do this painting process. So it's not necessarily linear in fashion, though there are some linear painting steps that we go through. It's somewhat abstract thinking, but it's almost as if you set an intention, and if you have your painting or your canvas, it's almost like you walk into the canvas as a portal to gain this information, and you then connect with your painting and gain information from this painting to help you in traversing and changing if you need to, or growing a new line of business, or opening up new pathways for yourself and your work. It's quite magical.
It sounds like it. And so, as you're sort of describing that, like what's coming into my head is that, there have been times when I have not been sure, what sort of path to make, or I'm not able to make a decision, or been sort of, stressed out, and something's wrong and I'm not sure what or why. And sometimes like just doodling or even just like writing things down help to kind of, express that in some kind of way. And then once I was able to kind of see what was on the page, I could kind of break it apart and see what was in there. So this whole like painting thing is starting to make sense. And so when you had these, so you say like, set your intention and decide what you want to create. And so when you work with people to do these sort of paintings, I mean, what kind of goes on in that discussion when you say, well, what I want to create? Like, is there a decision made to like paint a certain object, or is it just like abstract and see where it goes, or like what sort of happens there?
It's a combination of things. So you brought up some very good things. So yes, we do writing and journaling alongside painting, because this is activating both sides of the brain. There's a lot of brain science about using the right and left hemisphere of the brain and creating some new neural pathways of connection. So that's one of the things. And it is kind of like a problem solving structure as you go through this. So you might first begin abstractly with just color, but we then do some visionary imagination as a way to go inside of ourselves for symbols. So this way it's very unique and personal to you. Like, I really focus on what comes out of you and drawing that out of you, so that that symbol, that image is going to inform you. You're kind of like working with your own unconsciousness. And you're right in a sense that sometimes you break it apart. When we talk or dialogue, part of that might be assessing or breaking it down or realizing what direction we want to go in. But then as we paint, we're kind of opening up this pathway of possibility, for lack of a better word. It's a very stress-free environment. You're working with color and you're kind of painting. And then sometimes it's actually hard work because you are creating a painting too, and you're learning some new techniques. but it's really about the process of it that informs you and your work. So it's very, I don't know how to explain it. It's very deeply personal to you, and it's also a lot of fun. So it kind of brings you to a place of peace, especially when you're struggling or you're not sure or indecisive, or if you felt that you went down a wrong path, or especially if you feel stuck or you're in some kind of transition. This really helps with that.
And so to help us give us an idea, I know that we're kind of in audio only here, but can you kind of tell us like I mean what sort of like paintings do people end up creating? I mean, I know that like everything's different, but maybe just to give us an example, like I mean, is it like bright colors, or is it like a landscape, or like I mean, what kind of like what ends up being created in this sort of process?
Well, you never know what's going to be created, but the one thing in this particular process which is important is you have to be able to paint some kind of sentient being, whether it's a tree or a person or a angel or a tiger. Frequently, there's always some kind of landscape in the image with the main subject matter, and you never know what's going to come out. So sometimes people are a little bit, they try to repress the first image that they saw. I said, no, just go with it. It's better if you just go with the first thing that you see, because there's something in that image that is going to inform you. So like, don't censor yourself, So you never know what's going to come up. And that's kind of the beauty and the magic of it. So at first something appears, you usually have the first being or symbol. And then as you continue to paint, sometimes things morph in from one thing to another. It might have been a flower and then it morphs into a boat. Like, you just don't know what's going to happen through every step of the way. And that's also kind of fun and magical.
And is there a reason why the task is to draw a sentient being? Is that just so they get like that sort of like abundance kind of feeling of like you think of something that's alive and in a sense it isn't self alive, or like what's the reason for
I think
thinking of
that
a
the
sentient
main,
being?
yes, the main reason is that working with archetypes. So a lot of this, visionary imagination is you're coming in for certain symbols. And, from beginning of time, before there were words, we worked in symbols. We used your hands on cave paintings. We used fire and coal and things to draw with. So we're very visual people. And so symbols, whether it's a tree or a tiger or a shepherd or a wizard or an angel, holds a lot of potent information for the person. And so when you start to connect with that being, it actually kind of informs you and gives you information that you would not have known. So you're really using consciousness, you're using a higher part of your brain, and you're accessing information in a different way.
Okay.
If that makes sense to you, yes.
Yeah, it's slowly making more and more sense here. And so so you have your client paint this picture, and it might start off as something and kind of morph into something else, and then there are symbols to go and look at. And so I mean, what happens at that part of the process? Like, do you both like look at and like analyze the painting and look for or messages or clues, or like what sort of happens after the painting is done?
Well, that happens all along the way. It happens at the beginning. It happens in our first breakthrough session, which I'd like to offer to all of your people. I do something called a mojo breakthrough session. So even just in the dialogue, in that initial dialogue, sometimes people say, wow, I didn't really, I knew something was amiss, but putting into words, it totally makes sense to me. Lots of times we're just so busy running around, getting things done and working and making the donuts that we don't take the time to kind of stop, reassess what we're doing, if this is right for now, or maybe we know something isn't working, or maybe we're working so hard and something's happened in our relationship life and something else is falling apart and we need to like reassess and regroup. So all of the steps along the way absolutely inform us, and sometimes the painting continues to inform us years later. So folks, some choose to continue or to make another painting to access more information, or they continue to study something that may have come up through the painting process. So again, you never know what's going to come up, but you have to take that time to look at it and talk about it. So it's very interesting. It might then start to come up in your personal life. The symbol that you saw might start showing up in your dream life. And it's kind of like following these divine breadcrumbs. It's a little bit of, it's part strategy, part suspense. It's a little bit mysterious too.
And can you give us some kind of example of like one of these symbols that might show up over and over that we might, look back at a painting we made years ago and kind of see it appear again? Any sort of example like that?
I think for each person it's different, but some that might be common might be a tree. Frequently trees come up. A lot of people have drawn some kind of bird, and each bird might represent something differently. Other people have some kind of source of light, whether it's coming from the being, around the being, part of the being, or part of the background, whether it's the sun or the moon. Water comes up a lot. Frequently people are painting the ocean or, some kind of water. So what's really beautiful is that there's so many ways to express yourself. And especially as a designer and a marketer and illustrator, that's what I find fascinating, because I never know what my students are going to make. And they're often surprised themselves that they had it in them.
So when these sorts of symbols appear, like you said, like a tree or a bird or light or water, or like, it's different for everybody. I know that like if I had a dream and I saw a tree, I would go and look up in a dream dictionary to figure out what the meaning is. And if someone, for example, keeps seeing a tree in their paintings, is there a meaning to look up or something like that? Or is it just a matter of like it's a different meaning for every person?
It's yes and yes. So as I said, there's certain archetypes. Apparently there's certain archetypes that come up for people and say around and through their life. For instance, one might be a father archetype. And if you draw a tree, it might represent some kind of father archetype, either your father, or it might mean that it's time for you to become a father. Or if I paint it, that might mean something different to me. So for each person, that might be a fatherly archetype, or it could be a spiritual archetype, because frequently trees are a symbol for that. So yes, you can research it in a dream dictionary, and that's helpful. But for each person, it's nuanced differently based on their age, based on their experience of what they're going through. So I don't think one size fits all. But what's very interesting is that whenever I'm going through this process with one of my students, it's almost unfounded, unusual information comes my way that is replicating the exact symbol that they're working on. Sometimes I research it for them or they research it on their own, but it's really very cool to kind of uncover and discuss, to find out what are those symbols, what's in your toolbox of symbols, because it might be something that recurs in your life as well.
Yeah, and I think that this is really interesting because I think that sometimes we all are trying to solve one problem or another and we try to like think it through, right? We try to think too hard about the thing we're solving and sometimes it's just taking a break and getting away from it and allowing our mind to focus on something else and kind of letting that subconscious creep in and do its thing
Yes.
definitely sometimes solves the problem. And so, I want to in a couple of minutes here, I want to ask about the workshop you mentioned and stuff like that. But kind of as we're starting to wind down here, I'm now that we kind of like dove in and we got some sort of ideas and examples about all this painting stuff. So you mentioned at the beginning that you had these two clients, the they had Maria and Flo, and Maria kind of phased herself out of working at Target and got to do more of her yoga stuff, and then there was Flo, the retired executive, who did more of the painting. And so, I mean, what was like the whole like big picture process for these women? Did they just keep on painting and then analyzing and painting and analyzing, or like how did the painting kind of get them on this path to where they wanted to be?
Well, I think for each person it's different, and for both of these women, they're really engaged in the painting process. So I would say yes, it's this kind of thing where you're painting, you're analyzing, you're painting, you're feeling. You know, it's not only the mind. You're painting, you're knowing, you're painting, you're remembering, you're painting, you're seeing, you're painting, you're hearing. So you're really going through all of your senses, Robert. And if you're a kinesthetic person, it might come to you kinesthetically. And we are sometimes using our logical mind. We're sometimes doing a lot of abstract thinking. I can do some, analysis of a symbol with a person. But you are right that, some of my clients who come in, they think too hard, and I have to tell them, they're always trying to figure out the process, what the next step is. And I tell them to slow down and be in the moment and do the step at hand. Because lots of people were trying to push the process to get to the end result. And it's really not like that. It's kind of like life. It's like, a flower is going to be a shoot out from the ground. And you can't yank that shoot out of the ground to make the flower bloom, right?
Right.
So for each person, it's different, Some flowers come up in spring, some are evergreen, some are, seasonal, one bloom. So each person is different as well.
Interesting. So don't force it. And that whole idea of living in the moment, I don't know if that's just one of those things where like I've been like paying extra close attention to it, but I just keep on like picking that up, like talking to people or just like thinking about, what's the big lesson for me lately is that whole like, living in the present moment sort of thing and focusing on just small simple tasks because I mean
That's right.
like you said, a lot of people, especially these days, are stressed out and thinking about the future and how to pay all these bills, and they're not even
Right.
enjoying the present moment. And I think about times when like if I go into like a movie theater and I turn off my phone and I just kind of like the whole outside world kind of goes away and I'm just in that movie for a couple of hours, and then I come out of that movie theater in a completely different state of mind. I'm like a different person 2 hours later, as opposed to a lot of us are just kind of keyed up all day long, and we're not even really like enjoying things or really getting to the place that we need to be. So yeah, I really like this idea of like being in the moment and painting something and starting with that sort of blank space, and there's like infinite possibilities, and as you sort of fill things in, you make decisions about what to fill in, and that slowly kind of paints you into a corner, but then you end up near the end of this thing that kind of formed almost like a kind of Ouija board, like it just kind of formed on its own. So super interesting stuff. And so you mentioned that you have some of these resources and some kind of like exercise or some kind of workshop for people to check out. So can you tell us about, if people like this idea, do you have any websites or anything for people to check out that kind of keep the ball rolling on this?
Sure, I'd like to give them a few different options. The first one would be if they're interested in this with me, I will give them a free mojo breakthrough session. And that's about 50 minutes. And they can sign up through www.mojo.acuity, that's spelled ACUITY, scheduling.com. So that's mojo.acuityscheduling.com. And in there, they would find out what it is that they want to create in their life, any challenges they might be having. We talk about what might be holding them back and some steps to take to move forward. So that's one thing that they can do. Another is if they'd like to connect with me on Facebook or LinkedIn, they could find me at Leslie Nolan or Leslie Nolan Design. And my website is www.leslienolandesign.com. And you're absolutely right, Robert. It's really about taking a step and living in the moment. And that's about the amount of time we paint, is either 2 or 2.5 hours. So it's a nice little refresher. You get so involved in the colors of the paint that you completely forget about your life for a couple hours, and you're renewed and you're refreshed, and you have new eyes to see your life differently. And that's what we need at this time in this world, I believe, and especially in our work.
I think so too, and I think that when a lot of people, they kind of try to take the shortcut, they like, drink coffee or they drink alcohol or they shoot something in their arm or they take a pill. They're just looking to kind of take that break or kind of unplug for a little while. And why put your body through all the process of all that crap? Why not do it the like the clean way, right? The smart way, the way by doing it with your brain and just by doing some of this painting stuff. So this sounds really great if you're a stressed out entrepreneur, if you just feel like you're spread super thin, if you feel like just it's overwhelming you, then maybe you need to kind of slow things down and take one of these exercises because everything else has not been working if you're kind of at this point. So everyone, if you're looking for a change, if you're looking to try out this technique, then definitely schedule that Mojo breakthrough session at mojo.acuityscheduling.com. And if you want to check out what Leslie Nolan is up to, then go to leslienolandesign.com and then search her on Facebook and on LinkedIn under Leslie Nolan. So I want to thank you so much, Miss Leslie Nolan, for stopping by and sharing with us this really cool technique and how it works and what it can do for people. So thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Thanks for the invitation. And I hope that you have an enjoyable, slow, wonderful summer.
Do you run your online business using WordPress? Did you know that the #1 reason why people's WordPress sites get hacked is because of outdated plugins, outdated WordPress, or just flat out not knowing what they have out there? I mean, how many times have you created a test site and just let it sit there? You're leaving yourself at risk. Besides that, you're wasting a ton of time every single time WordPress updates or your plugins update. There's a better way. Check out Website Remote, where you can manage all of your WordPress sites from one simple-to-use dashboard. I'm talking about comparing what's on each site, comparing what versions are out there, and, most importantly, choosing what you want to update when you want to update it with one single click. This is the way that you need to be managing all of your WordPress sites. And we have a special just for you for being a listener of the Lance Tomashiro Show. Head on over to websiteremote.com/LTS. That's websiteremote.com/LTS to get your 99-cent trial started today. You're never going to look at managing your WordPress sites the same way again.